Georgia, thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Got a lot to talk about with your short-term forecast in the terms of some near record temperatures, in terms of some rain chances, in terms of even some storm chances as we go into the weekend. So we'll break down everything you need to know in full detail. First things first, let's go ahead and talk about your rainfall for the month of February, because we've only had 2 days where we've actually recorded rainfall. Actually, I think 3, because we go back to the beginning of the month. We did see one of those days, I think it was around the 4th or the 5th, where we recorded rainfall, but we were having issues with our sensors over there at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. Nonetheless, what we have tallied for the month so far is going to be just over an inch of rain, and over the last couple of days we have decreased from the dry category down into the very dry category. So we are still well behind our pace of where we should be for the month of February, getting into the tail end of the month. And here's the latest update with your drought monitor that we got this morning. We were hopeful that things might improve. We saw quite the opposite. In fact, we saw areas of southeastern central Georgia get expanded into this extreme drought, that red color down there, for portions of Dodge County, eastern and southeastern Lawrence, southern Johnson County, and then all of Telfair, Wheeler, Montgomery, and Treutlen counties, along with that Toombs County down in Vidalia. So everyone is definitely in need of some much needed rain. I don't know if this took into account all the rain that we got this past weekend. Overall, we didn't receive too much, and overall it shouldn't have really helped out our drought monitor too much, but I think it was enough to at least halt the drought conditions from worsening, and that's what we saw mainly in west central Georgia, but not necessarily down in southeast central Georgia, where we are continuing to see that those rainfall amounts are not near as much as what we saw over to the west. So good news is we have more rain chances on the horizon, but we are going to have no shortage of warmth as we close out the work week. Then we're going to start those on and off rain chances really as we go throughout the rest of today, but it's not going to be anything too significant in the way of rainfall. And another cold snap is going to be ahead as we go into the beginning of next week. So like I said, let's break it all down, starting with your current conditions, where finally we see some sunshine peeking through what started out as a very gray and overcast start to your Thursday morning. And we are even seeing, maybe that's a bug right there on the Skycam lens here in downtown Macon, and that would make sense because temperatures are so warm right now. It is probably leading to maybe some insects getting an early awakening as we are in the tail end of February. But along with starting to see some clearing in the clouds, we are continuing to watch some gusty winds blow out of the south. So these flags are blowing from left to right, indicating a southerly direction to your winds, and maybe even blowing back towards the camera a little bit that we can get a glimpse of with some of these flags, like the Georgia National Fairgrounds flag right there as we look off over to the west. So your temperatures, plenty of 70s. We have been searching for some 70s here in the southern United States as of recently, and what we are seeing is all of our neighboring states, including some upper 70s in areas like Orlando over to Houston down to New Orleans. This is looking typically like a summertime temperature map that we would be showing as we are into the 11 a.m. hour now. 60s to the north of us, 50s to the north of those, and then back over here behind the cold front we are going to be talking about. That's where we start to spot some cooler air. 47 in Wichita, 24 in Denver, and then another 47 over in northern Texas up in Amarillo. So everyone down in the deep south is mighty warm. Good mix of some 60s and some 70s down here in the southeast United States. 62 at the coolest up there in Greenville. Actually a 59 we can spot over here in Myrtle Beach. But right here in Macon, Vidalia, Albany, getting into the Columbus area, some low and mid 70s across the state of Georgia. And down here in central Georgia, we see numbers as high as 77 degrees already in Unadilla, 76 in Warner Robins, and it doesn't look like anyone except Swainsboro is hovering in the upper 60s. Spot a 70-degree mark over there in Thomaston. So it's a very warm start to the day already. And along with that, it is a windy late morning period. This will take us into the afternoon, where right now we have gusts as high as 25 miles per hour up in Macon, 24 mile per hour gust in Cochran, 20 mile per hour gust over in Butler. But the sustained winds are anywhere from about 9, maybe 7 miles per hour at the lowest, all the way up to 15 and maybe 18 miles per hour. It is a windy afternoon already, and that is going to continue to propel that warmer and more humid air mass in from down to the south and the southwest. That's where you're going to spot some dew point temperatures, say in the mid to the upper 60s in areas like Dooley County, Chris County, down to Sumter County, as opposed to maybe some scattered low and mid 60s farther up to the north and the northeast. But overall, there is a noticeable humidity in the forecast. Not super swampy like it would be, say, during the summertime months, but this is definitely pretty warm as far as the dew point temperature standards go for this time of year. So satellite and radar picture is showing plenty of widespread cloud cover. Again, the lighter white and kind of the lighter gray shades that you have, that's going to indicate some denser cloud cover as opposed to the darker gray shades that we do see over here in areas like Houston County, Peach, getting into Crawford, and up here into Macon-Bibb County. So the cloud cover not as dense in nature farther down to the south, and along with this cloud cover, a fairly good cluster of some widespread steady showers, maybe even some light rain that's across areas like Telfair, Wheeler counties, getting over into Montgomery County, and then all the way over into Toombs County here at the 11 a.m. hour. So some spotty showers, we will be dealing with those over the course of the next couple of hours, all the way through the afternoon. And right now you can see it's a very gloomy image all across the southeast United States. But let's go ahead and talk about some numbers, because that's going to kind of be the first part of your forecast and the most immediate thing, because in fact, we've already broken a record as of this morning, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. 49 as we started out yesterday morning, right there around the 50-degree mark, and then 72 for a high temperature, as we did get some breaks in the cloud cover during the late morning and early afternoon time frame. 64 your average high temperature, so we were a couple degrees above that. In fact, your high temperature from yesterday, exactly the same as what we saw on Tuesday. Like I said, yesterday is going to look a little bit different in the form of increased cloud cover. However, it is going to feel the same as both Monday and Tuesday really felt. 80 degrees the record yesterday back in 1951, 8 degrees shy of that record, and obviously we were nowhere close to that record low of 11 degrees set back in 1900. So no rain yesterday. Your departure is now around 3.5 inches below where we should be. And over the month of February, we are now adding the tally up to 10 days in a row with an above average high temperature, making the second day in a row that we hit the 72-degree mark for a high temperature, and starting to get into the neighborhood of some of the warmest numbers we've seen throughout the month of February. The title still right now goes to February 11th, last Wednesday, where we did see a high temperature of 74 degrees. But take a look at how many above average days we have now. 12 for the month of February out of just 18 days into the month. So we've had 5 below average days, and that all happened within the first week of February, and 1 right at average day. And that happened as of, I believe that was Super Bowl Sunday, going back into the 8th. So we have entered a very warm stretch, and the warm stretch will continue throughout the rest of the work week and into the beginning of the weekend, because today's high temperature only gets warmer than what we did see yesterday. 81 degrees for a high. We are seeing some numbers that are not too far off that threshold so far, like that 77 that we spotted down in Unadilla. So 81 degrees is 17 degrees above average of 64 degrees this time of year. But there's a whole bunch of different aspects with your forecast that we do have throughout today. Number one, it is going to be a warm afternoon. And number two, we are going to see more peaks of sunshine as we go just past lunchtime into the early afternoon hours. And I think those peaks of sunshine do allow for a more substantial warm-up than what we saw as of yesterday. Then we have the spotty light rain showers, which we got a glimpse of down in Telfair, Wheeler, and Montgomery counties just a second ago. That will continue to be possible all throughout today. A slightly better rain chance than what we did see as of yesterday. Yesterday, the rain was so light that it wasn't even really popping up on our radar imagery, but now I think it's going to be a bit steadier in nature if you do see anything over the course of today. And then the southwesterly winds, 5 to 15 miles per hour, maybe even some sustained winds that get close to 20 miles per hour. But the occasional gusts are going to blow up to 30 miles per hour throughout today. And once again, that southwesterly wind direction just continues to propel warmer and more humid air into the forecast from the northern Gulf. So today is going to have a lot of different aspects with the forecast, like I mentioned. In fact, if we hit 81 today, it's going to be the warmest temperature we've seen, maybe going back until January 10th, where we hit a high temperature of 80 degrees. And past that, I think the last time we got somewhere above the 80s by a couple of degrees was right there around Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Christmas Eve, I think we had a high temperature of 85 degrees here in central Georgia. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I know it was the warmest Christmas Eve ever that we had back at the end of December to wrap up 2025. But you can see the month of January did have a very warm stretch towards the beginning of the month. We're kind of rivaling that warm stretch as we go into the tail end of February, which makes more sense for the end of February as compared to right in the middle of January when you are really in the middle of winter. This stretch didn't feel like winter whatsoever, but then we flipped the script as we went to the back half of January with some below average numbers. So here's a look at your meteogram over the course of the next couple of hours, peaking somewhere in the upper 70s. once again, our numbers, some of these numbers are already pretty close to what this graphic has us topping out at, but this is specifically for the Macon area. And like I continue to tell you as of recently, I do believe that we are going to overshoot what this graphic does say. So it makes me pretty confident in my prediction of at least 80, maybe 81 later on this afternoon. And the numbers begin to bump down right there between 5 and 6 like we typically see, but we're not going to see too much of a cool down, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment as well. So here's a look at your surface map. There is a big weather feature in the form of this dominating low pressure center, which is over kind of into eastern Kansas, maybe getting into the Kansas and Missouri state line over there by Kansas City. This center of low pressure doesn't have too much moisture associated with it right now, but it is going to deepen over the course of the next 24 hours. And it's going to move up to the north and the northeast. However, this cold front that's draping down from the south of it, that's going to kick into gear, and that's going to move down into the southeast United States. Don't worry about these stationary boundaries that you do see up to the north of us, over there to the northwest of this low pressure center. This low right here is going to move up to the east and the northeast, closer to the Great Lakes portion of the country, and then we are going to start to see this cold front down to the south of it move into the state of Georgia and eventually down into the southeast United States. But it is going to have some implications all the way past maybe going into just a one-day impact where the front sweeps through, sends us one line of rain, maybe some showers and some storms. This is going to have some lingering impacts because the front is not looking to have that clean sweeping motion through. It is going to stall, and it's going to hang out for a bit as we close out the work week and head into the weekend. So for the rest of today, spotty light rain for the most part. Some occasional pockets of some steady, maybe even some heavy rain, but I'm still not forecasting anything in the way of storms today. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a rumble of thunder or two, but we're not going to be talking about anything in the way of severe weather until it possibly gets into Saturday. So here's a look at future view through the rest of today. Some of those spotty green dots popping up. We are seeing more sunshine than clouds that does appear as we go into the closing hours of the afternoon today, right there around sunset at 6 p.m. tonight. Then we go overnight where once again the cloud cover builds in a lot more widespread as you walk out the door tomorrow morning. But this is 5 a.m. and I wanted to throw a pause point there because that's when we're starting the morning show, number one. Many of you may be waking up around that time, and go ahead and prepare for once again some spotty light showers, maybe some pockets of some steady rain to go ahead and greet you out the door early tomorrow morning. And this will continue to be the case through morning commute time going into around 7 to 8 o'clock. But then we're starting to see this frontal boundary come in from the north and the northwest, and we can get a good depiction about where it is. Once again, where these winds are converging. So where the winds are really shifting direction, they're coming in from the northwest behind the front, but where they start to go up to the northeast is going to be right up here, kind of into northern Georgia, right across the metro Atlanta area, and that's where we kind of start to see the back edge of some of those rain showers and some of the cloud cover associated with the front. So here you go, 7 a.m. it begins to drive in. It looks like it's going to be more so lunchtime before it makes its entrance into central Georgia. And wherever this front is situated, that will act as kind of the main axis for rain. So what I mean by that is the frontal boundary ahead of it, it will have a lot of lift. And we have a very warm and a very humid air mass for this time of year. So we are going to lift all that surface moisture, and along with that, that warming air or that warm air at the surface does contribute to a lot of rising motion as well. So that's why we are going to see a lot of rain showers pop up along the frontal boundary itself, because there's some organization with it and there's that lift associated with the boundary. So that's why we are going to see a broken line of some rain pop up, say around lunchtime. And where this frontal boundary does situate itself is still kind of up in the air. Right now, it's looking like it's more so going to be closer to us here in the Macon area, but the guidance is anywhere from kind of south central Georgia all the way up to the metro Atlanta area, but it is trending to be more through central Georgia throughout tomorrow afternoon. So that's what you see throughout the early afternoon and maybe getting into the late afternoon time frame. It does continue to try to push down. In fact, we're seeing the convergence of the winds all the way in south central Georgia as we go right to around evening commute time. Now, this would be a pretty good scenario for maybe at least dodging the rain as you're making your way out of work for that final day of the work week at 5 p.m. and heading out to dinner plans. It looks like most of the rain is down in south central Georgia compared to up in north central Georgia, but that's not going to be long lasting because we are going to see the front start to sag back up to the north, and it's going to kind of retreat a little bit as we go into your Friday night time frame, and some spotty showers will continue to be present during the evening hours. So right now, if you're trying to focus on the timing of this rain chances throughout your Friday, I would say the best chance is going to be mainly the afternoon hours. However, we have the chance of really just on and off showers, maybe even a few storms, maybe hearing a few rumbles of thunder throughout Friday in some of those pockets that maybe have the heaviest rainfall. However, we aren't necessarily looking at anything in the way of a severe weather risk as this front comes in and kind of stalls out. But I did mention that the front's retreating back up to the north. Once we get into Saturday, sometime in the late morning, early afternoon time frame, that's when the front begins to kick back into gear. And you can see it kind of draped up here along the metro Atlanta area, going back over just to the south of Birmingham. And that's where we're starting to see some spotty light showers and even some pockets of some heavier and steadier rain begin to organize once again as the front does retreat. And then it comes back down into central Georgia as we go into the afternoon time frame on Saturday. So obviously this isn't the most opportune timing for anything in the way of some outdoor plans, but Saturday right there around the noon hour, we're starting to see some heavier rainfall rates, even some flashes of some red. And as this line continues to push into central Georgia, still fairly broken, not gaining too much organization, but we are going to have those occasional pockets of some pretty dark red, which indicates really heavy rainfall rates like we have been talking about. And along with that, it could indicate a little bit of a stronger weather risk, which we'll talk more about in the SPC outlook in just a second. It does look like, once again, like most of our severe weather risks that we do have here in central Georgia, areas down to the west and the southwest of us are going to be in a warmer and a slightly more humid environment, but we do have the potential for maybe even a strong to possibly even severe warning as we go throughout the afternoon hours on Saturday. That timing looked to be sometime around the 5 p.m. hour. Then we go into 7 p.m. and it does look like we're continuing to keep a good amount of organization with this frontal boundary and some heavier rainfall rates even after we go past sunset. And as we go into the nighttime hours on Saturday, I do expect the temperatures to begin to cool down just a little bit because we're finally seeing some breaks in the cloud cover. And behind this frontal boundary, a cooler air mass is going to settle in, but it still looks like it's taking its time making its way through central Georgia, where we are continuing to see the winds flowing in very gusty from the northwest up in northern central Georgia. But down here in south and southeast central Georgia, we're not seeing much, kind of a lull in the winds, and they're blowing up to the northeast. So the front will eventually drive through as we go sometime overnight Saturday into early on Sunday morning. And then that's going to leave us with a dry forecast as we close out the weekend, and then we'll turn our focus to one of the more significant cool downs we have seen as of recently. So this is where things do stand as of your day 3 storm outlook. So typically 3 days out, we get outlined in maybe these low end level 1 out of 5 risk for seeing a potential strong or even severe storm or two. And that's once again what it's outlined for as of right now, just covering the bases for a stray area or two, kind of like last weekend where we saw that one severe thunderstorm warning pop up in the Four Corners area of Twiggs, Wilkinson, Bleckley, getting over into Lawrence County. That's where we saw the one lone severe thunderstorm warning last weekend, and that came in an outlined area that wasn't a level 1 risk. So that's the same risk we're looking at, just a select few areas going to pop up, maybe a potential strong or severe thunderstorm that could have some gusty winds. However, what I'm seeing as of right now, just doing kind of my initial prediction and where my gut feeling is kind of taking me as far as forecast wise, we've continued to reiterate the fact that these are low end severe risk, and they're only 1 out of 5. However, we have the highlighted potential from the SPC that we could see an upgrade maybe into a level 2 category, like we also did see as of last weekend over the course of your Saturday as we get closer and closer. And right now we do have a warmer and we have a more humid environment. In fact, unseasonably warm and maybe even record-breaking warm for this time of year that we haven't really talked too much about just yet. However, that is going to create a more ripe environment for maybe some stronger weather to form. So all in all, the main message is Saturday afternoon, you're really going to want to keep an eye out for maybe any potential upgrades. But right now, we do have the low chance of seeing something in the way of some more active and severe weather. But that is far from set in stone as of right now. Continue to stay updated really over the next 24 hours. I think we'll fine tune this forecast a lot better as we go into your Friday morning. And obviously, you'll probably want to have a contingency plan for some of those afternoon plans outdoors throughout your Saturday afternoon. Now let's go into the midnight hour overnight. Okay, I'm sorry. It's been a long week. I was trying to remember if it was Thursday or Wednesday right there. But overnight tonight, going into the midnight hour, some of these spotty showers are not even recording a trace of rainfall here in central Georgia, but the bulk of the rain does come in. It does look like sometime maybe more so on Saturday. That's where we're finally starting to see some totals get up to about an inch, maybe an inch and a half, maybe some lucky isolated spots where we do get 2 inches of rain, kind of like we saw as of last weekend, and really going to keep our fingers crossed that some of the higher rainfall totals pop up in west central Georgia or maybe down in southeast central Georgia, given the latest drought monitor update, having those areas in an extreme drought. But it does look like not everyone is going to receive the same amount of rainfall. Areas where the frontal boundary does stall over the course of your Friday afternoon into your Friday evening, that's where you're going to see your higher rainfall totals, hence why Montezuma, Unadilla, Cochran, Eastman, and all the way over to Soperton, that's where you see the main axis of rain sitting, because that's where the front does stall over as we go into Friday afternoon, and then we'll get a reinforcing push of some more rainfall totals as we go into Saturday. So 81 for a high temperature today, still hovering near 80 degrees for a high temperature tomorrow morning tomorrow afternoon, but tomorrow morning, 64 degrees. It looks like we're going to have an even warmer start to tomorrow morning compared to what we started out today with. And I already alluded to the fact that today did have a record-breaking warm morning low temperature. 30% chance of some mainly spotty light rain, but we could have some pockets of some steadier rain like we are currently seeing down in our southeasternmost counties. But then don't be surprised if you hear a few rumbles of thunder throughout Friday. I don't have much confidence in anything in the way of a severe warning popping up on Friday, but Saturday is the day that we are going to want to keep our eye out for, and it looks like the rain chances are most impressive on Saturday afternoon compared to what we do see throughout tomorrow afternoon. In fact, going back and looking at it in retrospect, I might bump this down to more of a 40 to a 50% chance of rain throughout Friday as compared to the 70% chance of rain, which I wouldn't imagine is out of the realm of possibility of getting an uptick as we go into the second day of the weekend. But still rather warm as we start out Saturday morning, and as we go into Saturday afternoon, the numbers just slightly lower than the record-breaking territory. So here's a look at the numbers. Record high temperature for today, that sits at 82 degrees, set back in 1956. Forecasted high is 81 degrees. And again, this is the Macon area. So if we do see an 82, maybe down in Wilcox County, Telfair County, Dodge County throughout the rest of today, that's not going to register as the actual temperature up here in Macon. So we take all these records as of the Macon area because it's a general idea really for most of central Georgia. But 81 is my forecasted high for Macon. And then tomorrow the record sits a little bit lower at 80 degrees, set back in 1991. That's exactly what I have for my forecasted high. But I think it's really going to be dependent on where that frontal boundary does sit and stall out at. If it sits over Macon, we have more cloud cover, we have more rain chances into the afternoon, and I don't think our numbers would quite get that warm up to the 80-degree mark, but only time will tell. It's really hard to pick apart exactly where a frontal boundary does sit, but we can see it more so in real time, and we'll kind of do a lot of nowcasting with it as we go into tomorrow afternoon. In terms of your morning low temperatures, they're obviously not getting into record-breaking territory for the coldest that it could have been. We were the farthest thing away from that this morning. In fact, it probably felt a little bit like summer as you walked outside this morning with some temperatures and even maybe feeling a little bit of that humidity in the forecast. I know all I wore into work today was a polo and some shorts because it did really feel like summer. And in fact, we did break a record. Right now, according to our 5-minute observations that we do see at Middle Georgia Regional Airport, the lowest I saw temperatures go this morning, 63 degrees. And your record warmest morning low was set back just 8 years ago in 2018 of 61 degrees. Well, that's also where the record does sit for tomorrow. That's set back in 1961, and we're forecasting some even warmer numbers for tomorrow. I had a 60 forecasted for this morning. We didn't get near as low as that. In fact, we kind of shattered the record overall in terms of the general expectations. But then 64 tomorrow, I wouldn't doubt that we maybe don't get out of the mid to the upper 60s. We're not going to see too much of a temperature fluctuation in light of this influx of a very humid atmosphere. And in terms of the winds, those are going to be breezy all throughout the rest of today. And then as we go overnight into tomorrow morning, still keeping breezy conditions in the forecast tomorrow as you wake up and start to make that morning commute. So you may want to grab the rain jacket that kind of acts as the windbreaker, if you will, throughout tomorrow morning before you make your way out to work and school. And the breeze does try to break apart, but again, it's all going to be dependent on where that frontal boundary sits, and future view wind gusts kind of have it sitting in our southernmost counties right there, the dividing line between the blue shades and getting down into some of those yellow shades. So we might see a brief reprieve from the winds as we go into your Friday afternoon, but they build back in for Saturday morning. morning and as we go into Saturday afternoon, especially as we go into Sunday morning where that front really does finally kick back into gear, sweeps through, and then typically after we see a frontal boundary kind of as potent and kind of as strong and organized as the one that is looking to move in, we do see our fair share of some gusty winds settling into the forecast right there around Sunday morning. But go ahead and take a look at kind of where that convergence zone of the winds are. It is going to be well down to the south and the southeast of us by Sunday morning. Keep that in mind when we get to your extended models here on Future View about your rain chances on Sunday morning. So here's a look at the best depiction of this front moving in, stalling out, and then kicking back into gear over the course of Friday and Saturday. Here it comes early in the morning at 6 a.m. on Friday. It's this dividing line between the green shades and the areas of no color where you can see the landscape of the earth. So that's going to indicate the dividing line between a muggy atmosphere and a completely dry atmosphere. This is what we mean when we talk about that cooler and drier air ushering in behind a frontal boundary. So it's pushing all of that green, that humid atmosphere down to the south and the southeast. But then once it stalls, that green color doesn't necessarily go away up here in central Georgia. It kind of fluctuates and it kind of hangs around in the picture all the way until the midnight hour on Saturday. And like I said, the front's going to retreat back up to the north just a touch, and that's going to send some scattered showers, maybe even a storm or two up near the Atlanta area before it drives back through central Georgia as we go into the later hours of Saturday. Still looks like it's kind of taking its time. There is a little bit of moisture behind this frontal boundary because it's kind of indicated about where those winds do converge from different directions. Looks like we're still holding on to a little bit of humidity behind the front, and that could lead to maybe some pop-up shower chances behind the actual front later into the night on Saturday. But as we go overnight into early morning on Sunday, rain chances are out of here, and we are not going to be dealing with anything in the way of really impactful weather conditions besides some gusty winds. So there's a look at your afternoon highs compared to the records for today and tomorrow. 77 for a high on Saturday, down to 62 on Sunday. Still a pretty pleasant afternoon, but it's going to be on the cooler side. And then it's definitely going to be pretty cold as we go into Monday. 48 for an afternoon high. If we keep some breezy conditions in the forecast, 48 is very likely to feel like the low 40s, maybe even the upper 30s. And your morning low temperatures well above average. In fact, some of the warmest morning lows that we have seen as of recently for the next 3 days. Well, those numbers finally drop down as we go into Sunday morning, and then especially more so on Monday and Tuesday mornings, where the lows will get back below freezing temperature and maybe even down into the mid-20s by the time we roll into your Tuesday morning. So go ahead and take those proper precautions for the pets, plants, pipes. First time we're dipping below freezing temperature in quite a while, so want to make sure that you are properly prepared for it. Now let's go into Sunday at 5 a.m. where the GFS has rain chances lingering. I don't think that's the case. I think the rain chances are already out of here for your Sunday morning church plans, or maybe even heading out of town, running some errands really early in the morning, getting an early morning workout in. I don't think you're going to have to worry about anything in the way of rain chances on Sunday. The front clears out a little bit earlier than anticipated by the GFS, and then we do see nothing but really sunshine throughout the rest of your Sunday afternoon, going into Monday and even going into most of Tuesday before some cloud cover creeps back in the forecast. Then going into Wednesday, still a dry forecast, but then later Wednesday into early Thursday, our next weather maker does take shape, and it looks like another front is going to begin to move through. Finally, at least we're getting one of these widespread rainmakers, it looks like, in the middle of the week, when we're obviously not going to have anything in the way of outdoor plans. You're just going to have your typical work day. So if this does go according to the European route, this might be some heavy and some pretty substantial rainfall on the horizon as we get into the end of the work week next week. But of course, we will fine tune that after we get through the eventful short-term forecast that we do have ahead. So what do you need to know? Outdoor plans you have throughout your Saturday afternoon. Have a contingency plan. Have plans to go inside if the weather does get a little bit messy. Right now we have the potential for maybe a severe warning or two, but I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see a little bit of an uptick with that. So there's still some details that we need to fine tune, and I want you to stay updated with Saturday's forecast, as it is an unseasonably warm stretch of weather and an unseasonably humid environment for some of these weather systems moving in. But really, I would say starting tomorrow and into Saturday, keep the rain gear handy, keep the umbrella and the rain jacket ready to go. You may get away with not needing it necessarily today with some of these spotty light and steady showers, but then after that it will be a story of the cool down, and that's where we're going to turn our attention attention to. And like I mentioned, 25 for a morning low on Tuesday, but it does look to be a relatively short-lived cold snap at the beginning of next week, and it does look like we return to the 70s as we get into the end of next week as well, where we'll talk about more rain chances, I imagine, next Thursday, according to what the long-range models did just say. So that's going to do it for your extended forecast here this Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. with another update on what to expect with your weekend forecast.